What happens when fear takes hold and the line between courage and despair begins to blur? Today, we enter a chilling chapter of Hogwarts history. Welcome to Grimoire Audiobooks, where stories come to life. Today, we're delving into Petrified by PotterGirl123, a fanfiction that reimagines the terrors of the wizarding world with a gripping twist. Disclaimer: before we begin, please note that this is a fan-created story and not part of the official Harry Potter canon. All rights to the original series belong to J.K. Rowling, and this audiobook adaptation is for entertainment purposes only. Petrified by PotterGirl123 brings us back to Hogwarts during one of its darkest times. Inspired by the events of the Chamber of Secrets, this fanfiction explores the fear, tension, and resilience of students as they face the unknown horrors lurking within the castle walls. Fanfiction like Petrified continues to breathe new life into the Harry Potter universe, giving fans the chance to explore untold perspectives and deeper character moments. It's stories like this that keep the magic alive. PotterGirl123 has earned recognition among fanfiction readers for their ability to capture suspense and emotion while staying true to the essence of Rowling's world. With Petrified, they weave a tale of mystery, bravery, and the unbreakable bonds of friendship. Grab your wands and brace yourselves as we unravel the chilling tale of Petrified. Petrified by PotterGirl123. Emma's POV. Summer break was great. After we got off the train and hugged Mom and Dad, we were in the car and drove home. In the middle, we got food, and we had an interesting conversation in the car. "How was school?" asked Mom, turning around from the passenger seat. I smiled at Hermione. We exchanged a look that said, "Let's not tell her about the Sorcerer's Stone." "Great," I replied. "Did you make any friends?" asked Dad. "Well, we met some boys named Ron and Harry." Hermione told them, smiling. Dad smirked at us. "Just met?" he asked slyly.
"Dad."
I whined, "We're 12. Too young." "Paul," Mum said cautiously. "Is that his name?" I thought it fit anyway. "Yeah, Dad," I said, with sass. "Emma," Mum said sternly. "Respect you, Father," I groaned. "Yes, Mum," I told her. Dad laughed. "Come on, Jean, let the girl have some fun." "I don't care." Suddenly, I made eye contact with Dad, and we started laughing. Soon, all of us were laughing our heads off. Eske. I instantly recognized the sound.
"Dad."
I cried.
"Stop."
"That's Fred's owl." Luckily, we just got home. Dad took the keys out of the car, and the second he unlocked it, I ran out. The owl that was flying landed on my shoulder, and I stroked its gray feathers. I took the letter out of its mouth, and there, on the ground, was a dead rodent. "Accio rodent," I chanted, and the dead rodent flew up. "Here you go, Errol," I told the owl, and he took the rodent and flew away. I turned around, about to open the letter, when I saw Hermione, who looked stunned. "Magic, school, no," was all I heard. Then it hit me. Oh no, I was about to get a howler, telling me not to use magic outside of school. Great. I opened the letter, and there were two inside, one from Ron and one from Fred and George. Ron's letter was, "Hey Em, it's Ron. I think this is too early, so send a letter," but Fred insisted he didn't look weird sending you one. He is currently tackling me to erase that, but ink doesn't erase. Ha, Fred. Anyway, how was the ride home? Are your parents as bad at Harry's aunt and uncle? I paused there. Harry's aunt and uncle were some of the worst people I've ever heard of. Dad called. "Come in. You can read the rest of your letter once we get inside." "Coming, Dad." I called back. I ran inside, with the wind in my face. It felt amazing. Once I got inside, I closed the front door and ran up to my room. It was then that I started reading the letter again. I hope they aren't. That would be horrible. I sent some candy with this, if they are horrible. Please reply soon.
Ron.
I smiled. The end seemed more like something Fred would say, but I couldn't refuse candy. Sure enough, inside the envelope was a small cauldron cake. I opened Fred's letter next. "Hello, Evangeline." I instantly burst out laughing. Last year, Fred thought my name was too plain, so he changed it to Evangeline. On with the letter. "I don't know if this will reach you in time, because Errol is the worst owl in the world. It also might be too early, I don't know. I've missed our jokes, though. I know. You'll send me a riddle or joke every day until school goes out, and I can make my family feel stupid. Yeah, that'll work. Anyway, like Ron, I sent some candy with this, but it's Muggle candy. Something called MS. What do the Ms stand for? The handsomest man in the world. Fred Weasley." I laughed again at the last part. Sure enough, there were M and MS in the envelope. I didn't realize Hermione come in my room. "Hey," she said, sitting on my bed, "watcha readin'?" "Letters from Ron and Fred," I told her. She nodded and left. I went to my desk and replied to them.
Ron.
"No, my parents are not like Harry's aunt and uncle. They embrace Hermione and I being wizards. Please tell Fred I told him to stop tackling you. Thank you for the candy, and I suppose it's a bit early, but that's okay. If I just talked to my sister all summer, I would die. Don't tell her I said that. If you do, Ronald Weasley, I swear I will kill you. Emma." I looked it over again. It was short, but it would do. I sealed it, and as Athena was reaching to deliver it, I took it away and said one more. She looked hurt, so I nuzzled her soft and fuzzy feathers and fed her. I took some more parchment and wrote Fred's letter. "Fred. Oh, I'm sorry. Handsomest man on earth. Is that your name now?" I'm laughing, not mad. "Anyway, thanks for the candy. Please stop tackling Ron. I don't think he likes it. Honestly, I don't think anyone would like it, and I gave Errol some food because he is not the worst owl in the world. As for the riddles, sure, I will send you one every day. Here is the first one. 20 people jump in a pool, but 24 heads pop out. How? Answer, figure it out. Emma." I smiled at my letter. I looked outside. It was sunset. I didn't want dinner, so I slept. It was a peaceful, dreamless sleep. Emma's POV. I woke up the next morning, on my bed, still in my clothes from last night. I got up to see if my letters to Fred and Ron were there. They weren't. I looked instantly at Athena, who looked proud of herself. I smiled as I walked over to her. I picked her up and put her on my shoulder. "Ah, Athena girl, you're so smart. You took the letter straight to Fred and Ron." She softly squawked as I nuzzled her feathers. Called a voice from downstairs. It was Hermione. "Yeah," I called back, putting Athena back down. "Breakfast," she said. "Okay." I responded, "Be right there." I got up and went to the bathroom. I got my mini toothpaste, and the second the mint touched my tongue, I felt amazing, alive, and clean. Once I brushed my teeth, I changed into some leggings and wore a blue shirt that said Ravenclaw that I got from my parents. I also had one that said Gryffindor. I walked downstairs and my family gave me death glares.
"What?"
I asked, sitting at the table. "Emma, did you perform magic outside of school?" Mum asked, having a deadly silent face. I guess," I responded, scared. "What do you mean, you guess?" asked Dad. "Well, when I was outside, reading Ron's letter, I started, but after the word Ron, my dad raised his eyebrows, but I ignored it. The owl that delivered it looked hungry, so I performed a summoning charm to get a dead rat off the ground, to feed it, and so I didn't count that as magic, so that's why I said, I guess." Hermione sighed. Any spell counts as magic. I nodded. "Why do you care so much?" "I mean, it didn't affect any of you," I argued, wondering why they were making such a big deal of this. Dad turned around and gave me a pink letter that said confidential in big purple letters and my address and my name. It also said Ministry of Magic. As soon as I saw it, I knew exactly what it was. A howler. I stared at it in confusion. But I wasn't confused at all. I slowly picked it up, as if it was about to blow up. I stared at the pink paper, scared to open it. What if they expelled me? What if they took me to Azkaban? Those thoughts raced off my head until I felt a sharp jerk and my hands were empty. Hey, I cried to Hermione, that's mine. Not anymore, she said, as she opened the paper. There was a breeze, and then I heard a sharp voice, the voice of the howler. Miss Granger, it started. It was a woman who certainly liked pink. It has come to our attention that you performed a summoning charm on June 31 at 7:31 p.m. Usually, we would take the magic user to Azkaban, but since you are only in your second year, we will let you off with a fair warning. However, you must fill out parchment work, which is enclosed in the envelope, on why you used the charm. Have a wonderful day. Dolores Umbridge. I sighed. I looked at my parents, and they both had disapproving looks. I know, I murmured. I took the envelope and, sure enough, there was a huge roll of parchment and a quill and ink. I took the quill and ink and started on the parchment, but before that, I took the envelope and made it into a parchment airplane. I walked outside and released it. I never saw it fall. I wished I could be like that airplane, flying away with no distractions. I sat down at the table and started on the parchment. Esque. I heard Athena fly down and land on my shoulder. I smiled at her, and for a second, just for a second, it seemed like she was smiling back. The parchment took a while, but it was okay. Once I was done, I gave the parchment to Athena, and she flew away with it. Ahem, young lady, a voice said from behind me. It was the Howler lady. Yes, I said, turning around. She was wearing a pink dress, and she kind of looked like a toad. You needn't send an owl. I have come to collect it, she told me in a fake nice voice. I knew this lady was a monster. All right, I replied. I whistled, and Athena came back, luckily. She didn't go too far. I took the parchment out of her talons and gave them to Umbridge. Here you go, I said, handing her the parchment. And the envelope, she asked, raising an eyebrow. I stuttered. Athena squawked, and it gave me an idea. Athena must have dropped it, I told her, hoping my lie would satisfy her. She nodded, and just like that, she was gone. I sighed and sat back down at the table. Sorry, Athena, I told her, I didn't mean to lie about you. I just sat there nuzzling her feather, like nothing was wrong in the world. Emma's POV. The days following Dolores' departure weren't good days. My parents were sorta goody two-shoes like Hermione. Maybe that's where she got it from. Anyway, so they were goody two-shoes, so they grounded me for using a small spell out of school. Totally unfair. I still got to send letters, but I wasn't allowed to go out or anything like that. All of the days, I sat down and wrote Fred riddles. When I wrote letters to Ron and Fred, they responded regularly, but Harry never did. I wonder why. Athena was extremely tired, but I think she gained some owl muscle in her wings, if that's possible. I sat down one morning, about 2 months before school started, and wrote letters to everyone.
Harry.
Hiya, Harry.
How's your summer been?
Are your aunt and uncle being okay? I got you some candy for yourself, and some owl food for Hedwig. I hope she likes it. Athena loves them. She will not stop eating them. Emma. I enclosed some M&Ms in the envelope, and by now, Athena learned to see when I was done. Smart bird.
Fred.
Riddle of the day. Poor people have it. Rich people need it. If you eat it, you die. What is it? I also gave you some M&Ms, and to answer your first question, I have no idea what they stand for. Evangeline.
Ron. Hey, Ron. How's the summer been?
I saw the raids the Ministry and your dad have been doing on the Malfoy's house. Tell him to keep up the good work. I also enclosed some candy. Tell your family hi for me. Emma. I sealed them all in blue envelopes with gold border, and Athena was off. I never realized how beautiful the night sky was. The next month, we got our letters from Hogwarts saying what we needed to buy. Second-year students will require The Standard Book of Spells, Grade 2, by Miranda Goshawk Break with a Banshee by Gilderoy Lockhart Gaddying with Ghouls by Gilderoy Lockhart Holidays with Hags by Gilderoy Lockhart Travels with Trolls by Gilderoy Lockhart Voyages with Vampires by Gilderoy Lockhart Wanderings with Werewolves by Gilderoy Lockhart Year with the Yeti by Gilderoy Lockhart. Almost every book was by Gilderoy Lockhart. I think of his beautiful face and sigh every time. His chiseled face, his golden hair, and his perfect smile.
Sigh.
Hermione and I love him. We pre-ordered all of his books, so we already had them all, but we arranged a day to go to Diagon Alley with Ron's family. I was worried about Harry, though. How would he go? His aunt and uncle certainly wouldn't take him. Called Hermione. What? I called back, deep in Thogot. We're going, she said in a sing-song voice.
Oh.
We are going to Diagon Alley today. I totally forgot. Coming, I told her as I quickly changed into my Hogwarts uniform. As I prodded downstairs, my mum smiled at me. Ready, sweetie? She asked. Ready, I nodded, confidently. Then let's go, Grangers. Dad told us, motioning for us to leave. We all laughed. It was nice, having us all as a family. The car ride was filled with laughs, smiles, and happiness. I thought of all my friends, and I instantly thought of Harry. How did he live without Ron, Mrs. Weasley, Hermione, me, and all the others because we're the only ones who actually care for him? I thought about this until something shook me. You okay? Asked Hermione, concerned. Yeah, I said, just thinking. She nodded, but still kept a close watch on me. I smiled at her. It felt good to be loved. We got to the Leaky Cauldron and went to Diagon Alley. It took my breath away as much as the first time I saw it. Bloody hell, people these days, they just won't move, muttered a voice behind me, and I knew exactly who it was. Ron, I screamed. I threw my arms around him, and he blushed. Gosh, it's just been a few months. Now it was my turn to blush. Yes, sorry, I muttered.
Oi.
Get out of the way, said another voice, exasperated. Fred. I screamed again. I threw my arms around Fred, and again, felt uncomfortable, so I blushed. I met all the other Weasleys until the last one. Hello, dear, said a plump woman, with the same ginger hair as everyone else. Hermione, this is my mum, Fred explained, pointing to Molly. Hello, Mrs. Weasley, I told her politely. Oh, please. Call me Molly, she told me, laughing. All right, Molly, I told her, smiling. That's better, she said. I laughed. I pretended to turn around, but I heard Molly say to Ron, I like her pretty too. I smiled at this. No one ever told me I was pretty. Then a question popped in my head. Is Harry with you? Asked Hermione. He was, but he got lost, Molly said. Let's go look for him, I suggested. They all nodded, and I was about to leave, until I saw my parents looking uncomfortable. OH, before I forget, I said, turning back around. These are my parents, Jean and Paul Granger. I motioned to each of them. You're muggles, exclaimed Mr. Weasley. They nodded, because I was nodding. We walked around in a group searching for Harry, while Arthur was talking to my parents. Where was Harry? Harry, over here, called Hermione. I instantly looked towards her and smiled as I saw a familiar green-eyed, black-haired boy with glasses come towards us. Hermione and Harry walked towards me, and I ran to hug Harry. Then I smacked him. Harry James Potter, why did you not answer any of my letters? I was worried. With each word, I smacked him. Geez, sorry, It's just Dash, Harry started, but Hermione interrupted us. What happened to your glasses? Hello, Hagrid. Oh, it's wonderful to see you two again. Are you coming into Gringotts, Harry? As soon as I've found the Weasleys, said Harry. Ya won't have long to wait, Hagrid said with a grin. Harry, me, and Hermione looked around. Sprinting up the crowded street were Ron, Fred, George, Percy, and Mr. Weasley. Harry, Mr. Weasley panted. We hoped you'd only gone one grade too far. He mopped his glistening bald patch. Molly's frantic. She's coming now, Dash. Where did you come out? Ron asked. Nocturne Alley, said Hagrid grimly. Excellent, said Fred and George together. We've never been allowed in, said Ron enviously. Which Weasley are you? Harry asked, looking at Fred. I smirked at Fred. I thought we had the same idea. Mr. Weasley, Fred said, in a deep voice that sounded nothing like his father. I instantly cracked up. Oh, Harry, can you not see? Let me help with that, Hermione said. Concerned, oculus reparo, she chanted, and his glasses were instantly better. Mrs. Weasley now came galloping into view, her handbag swing ing wildly in one hand, Ginny just clinging onto the other. Oh, Harry. Oh, my dear. You could have been anywhere, Dash. Gasping for breath, she pulled a large clothes brush out of her bag and began sweeping off the soot Hagrid hadn't managed to beat away. The Weasleys had explained the missing Harry predicament as well to me. Well, gotta be off, said Hagrid. See you at Hogwarts. And he strode away, head and shoulders taller than anyone else in the packed street. Guess who I saw in Borgin and Burke's? Harry asked me, Ron, and Hermione as we climbed the Gringotts steps. Malfoy and his father. I gasped. Did Lucius Malfoy buy anything? Said Mr. Weasley sharply behind us. No, he was selling. So he's worried, said Mr. Weasley with grim satisfaction. Oh, I'd love to get Lucius Malfoy for something. He trailed off. I would love to get Malfoy's son for something. You be careful, Arthur, said Mrs. Weasley sharply as they were bowed into the bank by a goblin at the door. That family's trouble. Don't go biting off more than you can chew, Dash. So, you don't think I'm a match for Lucius Malfoy, said Mr. Weasley indignantly, but he was distracted almost at once by the sight of my parents, who were standing nervously at the counter that ran all along the great marble hall, waiting for me or Hermione to introduce them. But you're muggles, said Mr. Weasley delightedly. We must have a drink. What's that you've got there? Oh, you're changing muggle money. Molly, look. He pointed excitedly at the 10-pound notes in Dad's hand. Meet you back here, Ron said to me and Hermione as the Weasleys and Harry were led off to their underground vaults by another Gringotts goblin. We waited for a while, but soon started laughing. It was great to be back with everyone. Back outside on the marble steps, we all separated. Percy muttered vaguely about needing a new quill. Fred and George had spotted their friend from Hogwarts, Lee Jordan. I was sad to see them go. I wanted to laugh with them, but they were fourth years. Mrs. Weasley and Ginny were going to a second-hand robe shop. Mr. Weasley was insisting on taking Mum and Dad off to the Leaky Cauldron for a drink. We'll all meet at Flourish and Blots in an hour to buy your school books, said Mrs. Weasley, setting off with Ginny. And not one step down Nocturne Alley, she shouted at the twins' retreating backs. I snickered at this. Harry, Ron, me, and Hermione strolled off along the winding, cobbled street. The bag of gold, silver, and bronze jangling cheerfully. Harry bought 4 large strawberry and peanut butter ice creams, which we slurped happily as we wandered up the alley, examining the fascinating shop windows. Ron gazed longingly at a full set of Chudley cannon robes in the windows of Quality Quidditch Supplies until Hermione and I dragged him off to buy ink and parchment next door. In Gamble and Jape's Wizarding Joke Shop, they met Fred, George, and Lee Jordan, who were stocking up on Dr. Filibuster's fabulous wet start, no heat fireworks. They promised to buy some for me as well. In a tiny junk shop full of broken wands, lopsided brass scales, and old cloaks covered in potion stains, they found Percy, deeply immersed in a small and deeply boring book called Prefects Who Gained Power. A study of Hogwarts prefects and their later careers, Ron read aloud off the back cover. That sounds fascinating. Yeah, I know, right? We totally need to know that, I said sarcastically. Harry laughed at this. Be respectful, Hermione snapped, but I could tell she was laughing too. Go away, Percy snapped. Course, he's very ambitious, Percy. He's got it all planned out. He wants to be Minister of Magic. Ron told Harry, me, and Hermione in an undertone as we left Percy to it. An hour later, we headed for Flourish and Blots. We were by no means the only ones making our way to the bookshop. As we approached it, we saw to our surprise a large crowd jostling outside the doors, trying to get in. The reason for this was proclaimed by a large banner stretched across the upper windows. Gilderoy Lockhart will be signing copies of his autobiography Magical Emmy today, 12:30 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. We can actually meet him, I squealed. I mean, he's written almost the whole book list. The crowd seemed to be made up mostly of witches around Mrs. Weasley's age. A harassed-looking wizard stood at the door, saying calmly, "Please, ladies, don't push there, mind the books now." Harry, me, Ron, and Hermione squeezed inside. A long line wound right to the back of the shop, where Gilderoy Lockhart was signing his books. We each grabbed a copy of the Standard Book of Spells, Grade 2, and sneaked up the line to where the rest of the Weasleys were standing with Mum and Dad. "Oh, there you are, good," said Mrs. Weasley. She sounded breathless and kept patting her hair. "We'll be able to see him in a minute." Gilderoy Lockhart came slowly into view, seated at a table surrounded by large pictures of his own face, all winking and flashing dazzlingly white teeth at the crowd. The real Lockhart was wearing robes of forget-me-not blue that exactly matched his eyes. His pointed wizard's hat was set at a jaunty angle on his wavy hair. I almost fainted at his beautiful face. A short, irritable-looking man was dancing around taking photographs with a large black camera that emitted puffs of purple smoke with every blinding flash. "Out of the way, there," he snarled at me, moving back to get a better shot. "This is for the Daily Prophet Dash." "Big deal," I said, rubbing my foot where the photographer had stepped on it. Gilderoy Lockhart heard me. He looked up.
He saw me.
My heart melted. His beautiful blue eyes were staring into mine. He eyed my half-Gryffindor, half-Ravenclaw shirt and gasped. And then he saw Harry. He stared. Then he leapt to his feet and positively shouted, "It can't be Harry Potter and Emma Granger?" The crowd parted, whispering excitedly. Lockhart dived forward, seized Harry and my arm, and pulled us to the front. The crowd burst into applause. My face burned as Lockhart shook my hand for the photographer, who was clicking away madly, wafting thick smoke over the Weasleys. I almost fainted again. "Nice big smile, Emma, Harry," said Lockhart, through his own gleaming teeth. "Together, you, Miss Granger, and I are worth the front page." When he finally let go of my hand, I could hardly feel his fingers. Harry and I tried to sidle back over to the Weasleys, but Lockhart threw an arm around our shoulders and clamped us tightly to his side. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said loudly, waving for quiet. "What an extraordinary moment this is. The perfect moment for me to make a little announcement I've been sitting on for some time. When young Harry and Emma here stepped into Flourish and Blots today, they only wanted to buy my autobiography, which I shall be happy to present them now. Free of charge, dash," the crowd applauded again. "They had no idea," Lockhart continued, giving Harry and I a little shake that made his glasses slip to the end of his nose, "that they would shortly be getting much, much more than my book, Magical Me. They and their schoolmates will, in fact, be getting the real magical me. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I have great pleasure and pride in announcing that this September, I will be taking up the post of defense against the dark arts teacher at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. I gasped. No way. The handsomest man on earth would be teaching me. The crowd cheered and clapped, and we found ourselves being presented with the entire works of Gilderoy Lockhart. Staggering slightly under our weight, we managed to make our way out of the limelight to the edge of the room, where Ginny was standing next to her new cauldron. I smiled at her, and she smiled back. You have these, Harry mumbled to her, tipping the books into the cauldron. All by my own dash. Bet you loved that, didn't you, Potter? You too, Granger, said a voice I had no trouble recognizing. I straightened up and found me and Harry face to face with Draco Malfoy, who was wearing his usual sneer. Famous Harry Potter and Emma Granger, said Malfoy. Can't even go into a bookshop without making the front page. Leave them alone. They didn't want all that, said Ginny. It was the first time she had spoken in front of Harry. She was glaring at Malfoy. I had the feeling she fancied Harry. Potter, you've got yourself a girlfriend, drawled Malfoy. Ginny went scarlet as Ron and Hermione fought their way over, both holding a stack of books. Oh, it's you, said Ron, looking at Malfoy as if he were something unpleasant on the sole of his shoe. Bet you're surprised to see Harry and Emma here? Not as surprised as I am to see you in a shop, Weasley, retorted Malfoy. I suppose your parents will go hungry for a month to pay for all those. Ron went as red as Ginny. He dropped his books into the cauldron, too, and started toward Malfoy, but Harry, Hermione, and I grabbed the back of his jacket. Ron, said Mr. Weasley, struggling over with Fred and George. What are you doing? It's too crowded in here. Let's go outside. Fred and George gave me a look, asking what was going on. I gave them another look back, and they understood. Well, Arthur Weasley. It was Mr. Malfoy. He stood with his hand on Draco's shoulder, sneering in just the same way. Lucius, said Mr. Weasley, nodding coldly. Busy time at the ministry, I hear, said Mr. Malfoy. All those raids. I hope they're paying you overtime. He reached into Ginny's cauldron and extracted, from amid the glossy Lockhart books, a very old, very battered copy of A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration. Obviously not, Mr. Malfoy said. Dear me, what's the use of being a disgrace to the name of wizard if they don't even pay you well for it? Mr. Weasley flushed darker than either Ron or Ginny, and both of them combined. We have a very different idea of what disgraces the name of wizard, Malfoy, he said. Clearly, said Mr. Malfoy, his pale eyes straying to Mum and Dad, who were watching apprehensively. The company you keep, Weasley, and I thought your family could sink no lower. Now my face was red. Not from embarrassment, from anger. There was a thud of metal as Ginny's cauldron went flying. Mr. Weasley had thrown himself at Mr. Malfoy, knocking him backward into a bookshelf. Dozens of heavy spellbooks came thundering down on all their heads. There was a yell of, "Get him, Dad," from Fred. Mrs. Weasley was shrieking, "No, Arthur, no." The crowd stampeded backward, knocking more shelves over. "Gentlemen, please, please," cried the assistant, and then, louder than all, "Break it up, there, gents, break it up, dash." Hagrid was wading toward them through the sea of books. In an instant he had pulled Mr. Weasley and Mr. Malfoy apart. Mr. Weasley had a cut lip, and Mr. Malfoy had been hit in the eye by an encyclopedia of toadstools. He was still holding Ginny's old Transfiguration book. He thrust it at her, his eyes glittering with malice. "Here, girl, take your book. It's the best your father can give you, dash." Pulling himself out of Hagrid's grip, he beckoned to Draco and swept from the shop. "You should have ignored him, Arthur," said Hagrid, almost lifting Mr. Weasley off his feet as he straightened his robes. Rotten to the core, the whole family, everyone knows that no Malfoy's worth listening's to. Bad blood. That's what it is. Come on now, let's get out of here. The assistant looked as though he wanted to stop them leaving, but he barely came up to Hagrid's waist and seemed to think better of it. They hurried up the street, Mum and Dad shaking with fright, and Mrs. Weasley beside herself with fury. A fine example to set for your children, brawling in public. What Gilderoy Lockhart must have thought.
He was pleased, said Fred.
Didn't you hear him as we were leaving? He was asking that bloke from the Daily Prophet if he'd be able to work the fight into his report, said it was all publicity. Fred's right, Mrs. Weasley, I agreed. But it was a subdued group that headed back to the fireside in the Leaky Cauldron, where Harry, the Weasleys, and all their shopping would be traveling back to the Burrow using Floo powder. Us, on the other hand, would be going home in our car. We said goodbye and got in the car. Hermione, why were those two men fighting? Asked Mum, still shaking. Well, I don't know if you knew it or not, but Mr. Malfoy was insulting you guys, and Mr. Weasley got mad, I said bluntly. No one asked any more questions for the rest of the ride. On Hogwarts Express. Have you seen Harry and Ron's? I asked Hermione, trying to find a seat on the train. She shook her head. I wonder where they are. Me too, I responded. Come on, let's go here. Everywhere else is full. I motioned towards a compartment with a blonde girl and a Ginny in it. Hey, Ginny, I asked, sitting down. Where's your brother and Harry? She jumped. I didn't see you, she exclaimed. I sniggered. Hi, I said to the blonde girl. Hello, she said in a dreamy voice. I'm Luna. Luna Lovegood, I smiled at her. Well, hello, Luna. I don't know why, but I liked this girl. I'm Emma Granger, I told her. I know, she said in the same tone. How, I asked curiously. I mean, she was a year younger than me. How did she know me? Ginny told me, she said simply. I decided to not ask any more questions when I saw Hermione, awkwardly sitting there. This is my sister, Hermione Granger, I told Luna. She nodded. The ride was extremely awkward.
I don't even know why.
Probably because Luna kept talking about Rackspurts and Nargles. I wasn't paying attention. Once we saw Hogwarts, I went to Hermione. Do you know where Harry and Ron are? I asked her. Wait, you don't, she asked. No. I thought you knew. Frantic thoughts ran through my head. Where were they? Then I had an idea. Ginny, where's your brother and Harry? I asked her, trying to sound confident. Wait, you don't know? She asked, her eyes wide. Well, they could be with the Nargles, Luna said in a dreamy voice. I rolled my eyes, but snickered. I'm going to change into my robes, I announced, and walked out. It was pleasant until I ran into someone.
Oi.
Watch where you're going, Granger. It was Malfoy. What do you want, Malfoy? I asked, annoyed. Where's Weasel and Potter? He asked. I don't know. No, please move. I shoved him out of the way. He grunted. Don't shove me, you filthy little mudblood, he spat. I didn't know what that meant, because Hermione would never tell me. I could tell it was bad, though. I changed and WNET back to the compartment. What's wrong? Hermione asked as the train came to a halt. Nothing, I said quickly. We got off the train and on the carriages. I wanted to know what was pulling it, but another thought raced in my mind as we got to the Great Hall. Where were Ron and Harry? Hermione and I made our way to the Great Hall, where everyone was already seated. I scanned the room, looking for Ron and Harry. Where were they? Suddenly, I saw the doors to the Great Hall come open and Ron and Harry were rushing in. They sat down nowhere near us, and a moment later I completely understood why. I looked up. Innumerable candles were hovering in midair over 4 long, crowded tables, making the golden plates and goblets sparkle. Overhead, the bewitched ceiling, which always mirrored the sky outside, sparkled with stars. Through the forest of pointed black Hogwarts hats, the first years were coming through the doors. Ginny was among them, easily visible because of her vivid Weasley hair. Meanwhile, Professor McGonagall, a bespectacled witch with her hair in a tight bun, was placing the famous Hogwarts sorting hat on a stool before the newcomers. Every year, this aged-old hat, patched, frayed, and dirty, sorted new students into the 4 Hogwarts houses: Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. I well remembered putting it on, exactly 1 year ago, and waiting, petrified, for its decision as it muttered aloud in my ear. I had ended up in Gryffindor, along with Ron, Hermione, and the rest of the Weasleys. Last term, we had helped Gryffindor win the house championship, beating Slytherin for the first time in 7 years. A very small, mousy-haired boy had been called forward to place the hat on his head. My eyes wandered past him to where Professor Dumbledore, the headmaster, sat watching the sorting from the staff table, his long silver beard and half-moon glasses shining brightly in the candlelight. Several seats along, I saw Gilderoy Lockhart, dressed in robes of aquamarine. And there at the end was Hagrid, huge and hairy, drinking deeply from his goblet. I sighed at Lockhart. How could one person be so handsome? I never understood how even Ron and Harry didn't find him attractive. After the feast, Hermione and I couldn't find Harry and Ron, so we decided to go looking for them. We looked in the corridors for a while. When I finally saw them, I ran to them, and they turned to see me and Hermione running towards them. There you are. Where have you been? The most ridiculous rumors. Someone said you'd been expelled for crashing a flying car, Hermione said, exasperated. Well, we haven't been expelled, Harry assured us. You're not telling me you did fly here? I said, excited. That is not the tone you should use with them, Hermione said to me sharply. Skip the lecture, said Ron impatiently, and tell us the new password. It's Wobblebird, said Hermione impatiently. But that's not the point. Her words were cut short, however, as the portrait of the fat lady swung open and there was a sudden storm of clapping. It looked as though the whole of Gryffindor House was still awake, packed into the circular common room, standing on the lopsided tables and squashy armchairs, waiting for them to arrive. Arms reached through the portrait hole to pull Harry and Ron inside, leaving Hermione and me to scramble in after them. Once Hermione and I got in, I saw many things. Ron was scarlet in the face, grinning embarrassedly probably from all the attention he was getting, but I could see one person who didn't look happy at all. Percy was visible over the heads of some excited first years, and he seemed to be trying to get near enough to start telling them off. Got to get upstairs, bit tired, he said, and the two of them started pushing their way toward the door on the other side of the room, which led to a spiral staircase and the dormitories. Night, Harry called back to me and Hermione, who was wearing a scowl just like Percy's. Night, I called back, but I wasn't going to sleep. This party looked like fun. Hello, Evangeline. Not mad like your sis here, yeah? Asked a deep voice behind me. No, handsomest man alive. I'm actually thinking why they didn't let me come with them. So you admit that I'm handsome? Fred asked, wiggling his eyebrows. But before I could answer, I had an interruption. Come on, Hermione said, pulling my arm. She dragged me to the dorms, where it was the exact same as last year. And let me say, it was the best sleep I've had in a while. The next morning in the Great Hall, Hermione and I were reading Voyages with Vampires again when Harry and Ron came in. Morning, we said at the same time, but Hermione said it in a different tone. One was stiff, and the other one was welcoming. Neville sat next to us, and was as cheerful and forgetful as last year. Mails due any minute. I think Gran sending a few things I forgot. I had almost finished the book when, sure enough, there was a rushing sound overhead and 100 or so owls streamed in. circling the hall and dropping letters and packages into the chattering crowd. A big, lumpy package bounced off Neville's head, and, a second later, something large and gray fell into my jug, spraying us all with milk and feathers. "Errol," said Ron, pulling the bedraggled owl out by the feet. Errol slumped, unconscious, onto the table, his legs in the air and a damp red envelope in his beak. Errol looked at me and chirped, like he recognized me. "Oh, no, Dash," Ron gasped. "It's all right. He's still alive," said Hermione, prodding Errol gently with the tip of her finger. "It's not that, it's that." Ron was pointing at the red envelope, but I glared at it, knowing exactly what it was. "What's the matter?" said Harry. She sent me a howler," said Ron faintly. "You'd better open it, Ron," said Neville in a timid whisper. "It'll be worse if you don't. My gran sent me one once, and I ignored it and," he gulped, "it was horrible." Harry looked from their petrified faces to the red envelope. "What's a howler?" he said, but Ron's whole attention was fixed on the letter, which had begun to smoke at the corners. "I got a howler over the summer, Ron. It's not so bad. It will all be over in a few minutes," I whispered to him. Ron stretched out a shaking hand, eased the envelope from Errol's beak, and slid it open. Neville stuffed his fingers in his ears. A split second later, I knew why. I thought for a moment it had exploded. A roar of sound filled the huge hall, shaking dust from the ceiling. His was much worse than mine. "Stealing the car, I wouldn't have been surprised if they'd expelled you. You wait till I get hold of you. I don't suppose you stopped to think what your father and I went through when we saw it was gone." Dash. Mrs. Weasley's yells, 100 times louder than usual, made the plates and spoons rattle on the table and echoed deafeningly off the stone walls. People throughout the hall were swiveling around to see who had received the howler, and Ron sank so low in his chair that only his crimson forehead could be seen. "Letter from last night. I thought your father would die of shame. We didn't bring you up to behave like this. You and Harry could both have died. Absolutely disgusted. Your father's facing an inquiry at work. It's entirely your fault, and if you put another toe out of line, we'll bring you straight back home." A ringing silence fell. The red envelope, which had dropped from Ron's hand, burst into flames and curled into ashes. Harry and Ron sat stunned, as though a tidal wave had just passed over them. A few people laughed, and, gradually, a babble of talk broke out again. Hermione closed voyages with vampires and looked down at the top of Ron's head. "Well, I don't know what you expected, Ron, but you Dash. Don't tell me I deserved it," snapped Ron. Professor McGonagall was moving along the table, handing out course schedules. I took mine and saw that we had double herbology with the Huffpuffs first. I think Neville liked that. Harry, Ron, me, and Hermione left the castle together, crossed the vegetable patch, and made for the greenhouses, where the magical plants were kept. At least the howler had done one good thing. Hermione seemed to think Harry and Ron had now been punished enough and was being perfectly friendly again. I don't think it was the best way to change her, but it was efficient. As we neared the greenhouses, we saw the rest of the class standing outside, waiting for Professor Sprout. Harry, Ron, me, and Hermione had only just joined them when she came striding into view across the lawn, accompanied by Gilderoy Lockhart. Professor Sprout's arms were full of bandages. I spotted the whomping willow in the distance, several of its branches now in slings. I glanced at Harry knowingly, and he smiled. Professor Sprout was a squat little witch who wore a patched hat over her flyaway hair. There was usually a large amount of earth on her clothes and her fingernails. Gilderoy Lockhart, however, was immaculate in sweeping robes of turquoise, his golden hair shining under a perfectly positioned turquoise hat with gold trimming. "Oh, hello there," he called, beaming around at the assembled students. "Just been showing Professor Sprout the right way to doctor a whomping willow." But I don't want you running away with the idea that I'm better at herbology than she is. I just happen to have met several of these exotic plants on my travels. Greenhouse 3 today, chaps, said Professor Sprout, who was looking distinctly disgruntled, not at all her usual cheerful self. There was a murmur of interest. We had only ever worked in Greenhouse 1 before. Greenhouse 3 housed far more interesting and dangerous plants. Professor Sprout took a large key from her belt and unlocked the door. I caught a whiff of damp earth and fertilizer mingling with the heavy perfume of some giant, umbrella-sized flowers dangling from the ceiling. I was about to follow inside when Lockhart's hand shot out. "Harry, I've been wanting a word. You don't mind if he's a couple of minutes late, do you, Professor Sprout?" Judging by Professor Sprout's scowl, she did mind, but Lockhart said, "That's the ticket," and closed the greenhouse door in her face. "What do you think he wanted to talk about?" I asked Hermione while we were walking to Greenhouse 3. "No idea," she said, and no one mentioned it. After a while, Harry did come in and stand between me and Hermione. Professor Sprout was standing behind a trestle bench in the center of the greenhouse. About 20 pairs of different colored earmuffs were lying on the bench. She said, "We'll be repotting mandrakes today. Now, who can tell me the properties of the mandrake?" To nobody's surprise, apparently, Hermione and me were the first hands into the air. We smiled at each other and chanted. Mandrake, or mandragora, is a powerful restorative, we said, but is used to return people who have been transfigured or cursed to their original state. "Excellent. 20 points to Gryffindor," said Professor Sprout. The mandrake forms an essential part of most antidotes. It is also, however, dangerous. Who can tell me why? Hermione and I shot our hands up again. "The cry of the mandrake is fatal to anyone who hears it," we said promptly. "Precisely. Take another 20 points, said Professor Sprout. "Now, the mandrakes we have here are still very young." She pointed to a row of deep trays as she spoke, and everyone shuffled forward for a better look. 100 or so tufty little plants, purplish-green in color, were growing there in rows. "Everyone take a pair of earmuffs," said Professor Sprout. There was a scramble as everyone tried to seize a pair that wasn't pink and fluffy. I had to get a pink and fluffy one. "When I tell you to put them on, make sure your ears are completely covered," said Professor Sprout. "When it is safe to remove them, I will give you the thumbs up." "Right. Earmuffs on." I snapped the earmuffs over my ears. They shut out sound completely. Professor Sprout put the pink, fluffy pair over her own ears, rolled up the sleeves of her robes, grasped one of the tufty plants firmly, and pulled hard. Instead of roots, a small, muddy, and extremely ugly baby popped out of the earth. The leaves were growing right out of his head. He had pale green, mottled skin, and was clearly bawling at the top of his lungs. Professor Sprout took a large plant pot from under the table and plunged the mandrake into it, burying him in dark, damp compost until only the tufted leaves were visible. Professor Sprout dusted off her hands, gave them all the thumbs up, and removed her own earmuffs. "As our mandrakes are only seedlings, their cries won't kill yet," she said calmly, as though she'd just done nothing more exciting than water a begonia. "However, they will knock you out for several hours, and as I'm sure none of you want to miss your first day back, make sure your earmuffs are securely in place while you work. I will attract your attention when it is time to pack up. For to a tray, there is a large supply of pots here, compost in the sacks over there, and be careful of the venomous tentacula, it's teething." She gave a sharp slap to a spiky, dark red plant as she spoke, making it draw in the long feelers that had been inching sneakily over her shoulder. Harry, Ron, Hermione, and I were joined at our tray by a curly-haired Hufflepuff boy I knew by sight but had never spoken to. "Justin Finch-Fletchley," he said brightly, shaking Harry by the hand. "Know who you are, of course, the famous Harry Potter." And you're always top in everything. Hermione smiled at this. You're the one who's the top of class and in 2 houses, he said, gesturing to me. I smiled at him. It felt good to get validation. And Ron Weasley, wasn't it your flying cars? Ron didn't smile. The howler was obviously still on his mind. That Lockhart something, isn't he? Said Justin happily as we began filing their plant pots with dragon dung compost. Awfully brave chap. Have you read his books? I'd have died of fear if I'd been cornered in a telephone booth by a werewolf, but he stayed cool and, zap, just fantastic. My name was down for Eton, you know. I can't tell you how glad I am I came here instead. Of course, Mother was slightly disappointed, but since I made her read Lockhart's books, I think she's begun to see how useful it'll be to have a fully trained wizard in the family. After that, we didn't have much chance to talk. Our earmuffs were back on, and we needed to concentrate on the mandrakes. Professor Sprout had made it look extremely easy, but it wasn't. The mandrakes didn't like coming out of the earth, but didn't seem to want to go back into it either. They squirmed, kicked, flailed their sharp little fists, and gnashed their teeth. I spent 10 whole minutes trying to squash a particularly fat one into a pot. By the end of the class, I, like everyone else, was sweaty, aching, and covered in earth. Everyone traipsed back to the castle for a quick wash, and then the Gryffindors hurried off to Transfiguration. Hogwarts life was extremely ordinary after that, except for, well, the fact that there was a freaking chamber of secrets. Apparently Salazar Slytherin created a chamber which held a monster to kill Muggleborns like me and Hermione. Every step I took, I was terrified. We also found out that Harry was a Parselmouth, someone who can talk to snakes. It was the day of the game that decided who got the cup when Hermione wanted me to help her with something. She was looking for something on the monster about 2 hours before the game, and I helped her. We walked to the library and talked about it. "What do you think it is?" asked Hermione. "I don't know," I said, in my Quidditch robes. She brought a lavender mirror to look around. We got to the library and started looking. We looked in the monster section when I realized the library was empty. Hermione, I started, but I saw my sister flat on the ground, stone cold. Then I looked up and saw a pair of big yellow eyes, and then everything was black. I fluttered my eyes open and looked up from the ground. Ugh, I thought, what was that? I stood up, and the first thing I saw was my body. What? I screamed. My body was stone cold and pale. Soon it all clicked. I was petrified. I saw the professors pick up my body and take me to the infirmary. A voice whispered softly behind me. "Hermione?" I asked. I turned around and saw my sister behind me. She was partly transparent, and I could see through her. "Do I look like you?" I asked, referring to my body. She nodded. "Let's go to the infirmary to see our bodies," she nodded. We walked to the infirmary in silence, and we were almost there, but when Hermione burst into tears, I instantly ran to her. "Sure, it's okay," I whispered, stroking her hair. "I know," she said through tears. "We'll find a way to overcome being petrified," I told her. "Let's see ourselves," she nodded and got up. We went in the infirmary and saw Harry around my body and Ron around Hermione's. I got the feeling that Ron fancied her. "Hey, Hermione asked. I was honestly surprised when the boys didn't turn around, but then I remembered that we were petrified. Hermione and I gave up on trying to communicate with the two and started to do something more important.
Studying.
We worried about the antidote for a while, but then we heard that they were making a potion out of our herbology plants. So then, we worried about something worse, the exams. They'll be very tough. Along with studying, Hermione and I followed the boys around to see what they were planning. Like stalkers. We were reading in the library after hours. That's one great thing about being petrified. You won't get in trouble. Suddenly, I heard a shriek. "Emma, look." Hermione said frantically.
What?
I said as I looked up from my potions book. Ron and Harry are going to the Forbidden Forest. She trailed off when she saw the spiders following them. But that's forbidden. But then I thought about how we did it last year for detention. Hermione and I quickly got up and tried to catch up with them. But they were already in the forest by the time we got there. Where are they? I asked. Hermione shrugged, but shuddered after that. Let's look. We searched high and low until saw them talking to a gigantic spider. They look in trouble, I said to Hermione, but honestly I'm not surprised. We giggled, but this time they could die again. Hermione turned around and pointed to the Ford Anglia. Oh God, do you know how to drive?
She asked.
You really think that can run? I questioned. Just answer the question. She snapped. I guess. I shrugged my shoulders. She ran to the car and hot-wired it. How did she know how to do that? I read about this in a book before. She said, answering my question. She can read my freaking mind, man. When are they ever going to save us? I rolled my eyes. I don't know, I don't know. Okay, how is that for my first go on this book? It's a little short, but I don't know what to put Dragonfly. Soon thereafter, Hermione and I, realizing how useless Ron and Harry were, we heard footsteps coming towards the car. Get down, I screamed. I had much better senses than Hermione. She shrieked. Ron and Harry were headed for the car. Finally, I said, rolling my eyes. We got out of the car and saw they were running. Why are they running? Hermione wondered aloud. Then I turned and realized what was so scary. There was a mass amount of giant spiders headed straight for us. Where did they come from? Hermione and I weren't too scared because it's not like we can die again or be actually injured. We talked about this walking around. Something interrupted my thoughts. H. We heard a high-pitched shriek that could only belong to one person. Ronald Bilious Weasley. There was a spider on his face, and I swear, he looked like a tomato. Hermione and I tried to stifle a laugh, but we couldn't. We erupted into laughter. I forgot what it was like to laugh. Hermione said through tears or laughter. By the time we stopped laughing, which felt like forever, the boys were gone. They were a little light in the distance. We started to sprint it after them, and we learned we could fly. We were running, and slowly, I felt my foot lift off the ground. Slowly, I got higher and higher. The same thing happened to Hermione.
Whoa,
I muttered. I forgot how wonderful it felt to fly. Soon we caught up to the car and Hagrid's hut. The car stopped so suddenly that we nearly ran into the back of the car. We had reached the edge of the forest. Fong flung himself at the window in his anxiety to get out, and when Harry opened the door, he shot off through the trees to Hagrid's house, tail between his legs. Harry got out too, and after a minute or so, Ron followed, still stiff-necked and staring. Harry gave the car a grateful pat as it reversed back into the forest and disappeared from view. Hermione and I soon followed. I wish we could tell them that the monster is a basilisk and Hagrid is innocent. Harry went back into Hagrid's cabin to get the invisibility cloak. Fong was trembling under a blanket in his basket. I followed him in and saw him staring at his cloak. I miss you guys, and Hermione, he muttered. We wouldn't have almost died if you were. I felt like crying. It was in that moment that I decided to do everything I could to make sure I would get unpetrified. When Harry got outside again, he found Ron being violent sick in the pumpkin patch. Follow the spiders, said Ron weakly, wiping his mouth on his sleeve. I'll never forgive Hagrid. We're lucky to be alive. I smiled. I bet he thought Aragog wouldn't hurt friends of his, said Harry. Hermione rolled her eyes at this. She didn't think any of Hagrid's creatures had feelings. That's exactly Hagrid's problem, said Ron, thumping the wall of the cabin. He always thinks monsters aren't as bad as they're made out, and look where it's got him. A cell in Azkaban. At this comment, I wanted to punch him. He was shivering uncontrollably. What was the point of sending us in there? What have we found out? I'd like to know. That Hagrid never opened the Chamber of Secrets, said Harry and I, throwing the cloak over Ron and prodding him in the arm to make him walk. He was innocent. Thank you, I thought to myself. Ron gave a loud snort. Evidently, hatching Aragog in a cupboard wasn't his idea of being innocent. As the castle loomed nearer, Hermione and I wondered where we would sleep. In our beds? Could we even do that? Can we manipulate objects? The boys pushed the creaking front doors ajar. We all walked carefully back across the entrance hall and up the marble staircase. The boys held their breath as they walked. At last we reached the safety of the Gryffindor common room, where the fire had burned itself into glowing ash. They took off the cloak and climbed the winding stair to their dormitory. We followed them so we could try to plant clues in their room. Ron fell onto his bed without bothering to get undressed. Thank God. Hermione, and I didn't want to see that. Harry, however, sat on the edge of his bed thinking. The creature that was lurking somewhere in the castle, I thought, sounded like a sort of monster Voldemort. Even other monsters didn't want to name it. Then I thought about how close, or rather far, Ron and Harry were to finding it. I looked at Harry. He looked so hopeless. But he and Ron were no closer to finding out what it was, or how it petrified its victims. Even Hagrid had never known what was in the Chamber of Secrets. We couldn't see what else they could do. We had hit dead ends everywhere. Riddle had caught the wrong person. The heir of Slytherin had got off, and no one could tell whether it was the same person, or a different one, who had opened the chamber this time. There was nobody else to ask. I sat down still thinking, what if we could whisper things into their ear, so they could get our message? I slowly got up and whispered to Harry, the girl who died, never left. Hopefully they got your message, Hermione came over and said. In a flash, Harry got up. Ron. He hissed through the dark. Ron. Ron woke with a yelp like Fong's, stared wildly around, and saw Harry. Ron, that girl who died. Aragog said she was found in a bathroom, said Harry, ignoring Neville's snuffling snores from the corner. What if she never left the bathroom? What if she's still there? I smiled. That's my best friend. Ron rubbed his eyes, frowning through the moonlight. And then he understood, too. You don't think not moaning myrtles? Who else? Harry responded. Can we talk about this in the morning? Ron asked, drowsily. Sure, Ron, Harry said, half asleep. No. Hermione shrieked, but it was no good. They were already asleep. Lockhart's POV. Oh no, what have I gotten myself into? Why did I say I could save the girl? I don't even know the girl. I've got to get out of this stupid school now. I left the teachers' meeting and ran to my office. This is it. Goodbye, Hogwarts. In my office, I grabbed all my things and started packing. I packed for a good 2 minutes when I heard a knock. I peeked through the crack as I opened the door and saw Harry and that Weasley kid. Oh, Mr. Potter, Mr. Weasley, I said as opened the door a little wider. I'm rather busy at the moment, if you would quick dash. We have information for you, and we think we can help you. Harry said, cutting me off. Well, it's a terrible, I guess come in, I said in uncomfortable manner. The two kids came in to see my wrecked office and stared at me with a shocked face. Are you going somewhere? Harry questioned, eyebrow raised. Well, yes, I stated as ripped a life-sized poster off the wall and rolled it up. What about my sisters? The Weasley boy questioned rather harshly. Unfortunate. No one regrets more than I dash. You're the defense against the dark arts teacher. Harry yelled. You can't go now. Not with all the dark stuff going on here. Well, I must say, when I took the job dash, I muttered. now piling socks on top of my robes. Nothing in the job description. Didn't expect. You mean you're running away? Harry stated disbelievingly. After all that stuff you did in your books. Books can be misleading, I said delicately. I might as well tell them no one will believe them. You wrote them. Harry yelled. My dear boy, I said as I was straightening up and frowning at Harry. Do use your common sense. My books wouldn't have sold half as well if people didn't think I'd done all those things. No one wants to read about some ugly old Armenian warlock, even if he did save a village from werewolves. He'd look dreadful on the front cover. No dress sense at all. And the witch who banished the Banded Banshee had a hair lip. I mean, come on. So you've just been taking credit for what a load of other people have done? Harry asked incredulously. Took him long enough. Harry, I said, shaking my head impatiently. It's not nearly as simple as that. There was work involved. I had to track these people down. Ask them exactly how they managed to do what they did. Then I had to put a memory charm on them so they wouldn't remember doing it. If there's one thing I pride myself on, it's my memory charms. No, it's been a lot of work, Harry. It's not all book signings and publicity photos, you know. You want fame, you have to be prepared for a long, hard slog. I closed all my trunks and turned towards the boys. That's everything except one more thing. I pulled out my wand. Awfully sorry, boys, but I'll have to put a memory charm on you now. Can't have you blabbing my secrets all over the place. I'd never sell another book. Expelliarmus. My wand flew out of my hand into Ron's, who threw out the window. My back hit the trunks, and I groaned in pain. What do you want me to do? I said weakly. I don't know where the Chamber of Secrets is. There's nothing I can do. You're in luck, said Harry, forcing me to my feet at wand point. We think we know where it is. And what's inside it? Let's go. They marched me out of my office and down the nearest stairs, along the dark corridor where the messages shone on the wall, to the door of girls' bathroom. They sent me in first. I hope they did not see me shaking. A female ghost was sitting on the tank of the end toilet. Oh, it's you, she said when she spotted Harry. What do you want this time? This time? Do they come to the girls' bathroom often? To ask you how you died, said Harry. Oh, it was dreadful, she said with happily. It happened right in here. I died in this very stall. I remember it so well. I'd hidden because Olive Hornby was teasing me about my glasses. The door was locked and I was crying, and then I heard somebody come in. They said something funny. A different language, I think it must have been. Anyway, what really got me was that it was a boy speaking. So I unlocked the door to tell him to go and use his own toilet, and then she smiled. I died. How? Said Harry. No idea, she said in hushed tones. I just remember seeing a pair of great, big yellow eyes. My whole body sort of seized up, and then I was floating away. She looked dreamily at Harry. And then I came back again. I was determined to haunt Olive Hornby, you see. Oh, she was sorry she'd ever laughed at my glasses. She is creepy. I mean, real creepy. First I have to be in here, now she's talking about some person she haunted. I got chills. Lockhart. Weasley said, You're going first. He pointed at tunnel that once was a sink. What did I miss? Why must I go? I questioned. I won't be any help. They push me in anyways. It was dark chamber under the school. There was something on the ground, but I couldn't make it out. The boys landed next to me. It was snake skin. The boys started to discuss their plan, but I was making my own. All I had to do was jump the Weasley. He wouldn't see it coming. All I had to do was fall. I fell on my knees to see if it would work. Get up. I got up and dived onto him. I grabbed his wand and got up. The adventure ends here, boys. I said, I shall take a bit of this skin back up to the school, Tell them I was too late to save the girl, and that you two tragically lost your minds at the sight of her mangled body. Say goodbye to your memories." I raised Weasley's broken wand high over my head and yelled, "Obliviate!" There was an explosion, then there was nothing.
Ow.
Where am I? Emma POV. Lockhart's spell had backfired. Wow. All my respect for that guy had disappeared. The second thing I noticed, though, after Lockhart, was the snake skin. I stopped paying attention to the conversation and started walking over to it. Hermione said, "I think we should go." I nodded. I was positive they'd save us. I don't feel like writing the battle and stuff because I want to make this chapter the final one. Switch to Ginny POV. Where am I? What happened? The first thought I had was the diary. As Harry hurried toward me, I sat up. Oh no, Harry's here. My bemused eyes traveled from the huge form of the dead basilisk over Harry in his blood-soaked robes, then to the diary in his hand. I drew a great, shuddering gasp and tears began to pour down my face. What happened? My tears formed a puddle. Harry, I tried to tell you at breakfast, but I couldn't say it in front of Percy. It was me, Harry, but I swear I didn't mean to. Ardle made me. He took me over. And how did you kill that thing? Where's Riddle? The last thing I remember is him coming out of the diary. I stuttered. It's all right, said Harry, holding up the diary and showing me the fong hole. Riddle's finished.
Look.
Him and the basilisk. Come on, Ginny. Let's get out of here. I'm going to be expelled. I wept as Harry helped me awkwardly to my feet. I've looked forward to coming to Hogwarts ever since Bill came, and now I'll have to leave, and what'll Mum and Dad say? Fawkes was waiting for us, hovering in the chamber entrance. Harry urged me forward. They stepped over the motionless coils of the dead basilisk, through the echoing gloom, and back into the tunnel. I heard the stone doors close behind them with a soft hiss. After a few minutes' progress up the dark tunnel, a distant sound of slowly shifting rock reached Harry's ears. Ron. Harry yelled, speeding up. Ginny's okay. I've got her. I heard Ron give a strangled cheer, and we turned the next bend to see his eager face staring through the sizable gap he had managed to make in the rock fall.
Ginny.
Ron thrust an arm through the gap in the rock to pull me through first. You're alive. I don't believe it. What happened? How, what? Where did that bird come from? I couldn't talk. Fawkes had swooped through the gap after me. He's Dumbledore's, said Harry, squeezing through himself. How come you've got a sword? Said Ron, gaping at the glittering weapon in Harry's hand. I'll explain when we get out of here, said Harry. But later, Harry said shortly. Where's Lockhart? Back there, said Ron, still looking puzzled but jerking his head up the tunnel toward the pipe. He's in a bad way. Come and see, led by Fawkes, whose wide scarlet wings emitted a soft golden glow in the darkness. They walked all the way back to the mouth of the pipe. Gilderoy Lockhart was sitting there, humming placidly to himself.
His memory's gone, said Ron.
The memory charm backfired. Hit him instead of us. Hasn't got a clue who he is, or where he is, or who we are. I told him to come and wait here. He's a danger to himself. Lockhart peered good-naturedly up at them all.
Hello, he said.
Odd sort of place this, isn't it? Do you live here? All my respect for him had disappeared.
No, said Ron.
Harry bent down and looked up the long, dark pipe. Have you thought how we're going to get back up this? He said to Ron. Ron shook his head, but Fawkes the Phoenix had swooped past Harry and was now fluttering in front of him, his beady eyes bright in the dark. He was waving his long golden tail feathers. Harry looked uncertainly at him. He looks like he wants you to grab hold, said Ron, looking perplexed. But you're much too heavy for a bird to pull up there. Fawkes, said Harry, isn't an ordinary bird. He turned quickly to the others. We've got to hold on to each other. Ginny, grab Ron's hand. Professor Lockhart. I obeyed. He means you, said Ron sharply to Lockhart. You hold Ginny's other hand. Harry tucked the sword and the sorting hat into his belt. Ron took hold of the back of Harry's robes, and Harry reached out and took hold of Fox's strangely hot tail feathers. An extraordinary lightness seemed to spread through my whole body, and the next second, in a rush of wings, we were flying upward through the pipe. I could hear Lockhart dangling below him, saying, "Amazing! Amazing! This is just like magic." The chill air was whipping through my hair, and before I'd stopped enjoying the ride, it was over. All four of us were hitting the wet floor of Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, and as Lockhart straightened his hat, the sink that hid the pipe was sliding back into place. The bathroom brought back such terrible memories. Myrtle goggled at us. "You're alive," she said blankly to Harry. "There's no need to sound so disappointed," he said grimly, wiping flecks of blood and slime off his glasses. "Oh, well, I'd just been thinking if you had died, you'd have been welcome to share my toilet," said Myrtle, blushing silver. My face became hot and red. "Ugh," said Ron as we left the bathroom for the dark, deserted corridor outside. "Harry, I think Myrtle's grown fond of you. You've got competition, Ginny," I growled. "Where now?" said Ron. Harry pointed. Fox was leading the way, glowing gold along the corridor. We strode after him, and moments later, found ourselves outside Professor McGonagall's office. Harry knocked and pushed the door open. Hermione POV. We were walking back from the chamber when I saw Emma shuddering. I didn't say anything, but once we got to the infirmary, I spoke up. Are you okay?" I questioned, sitting on the bed my body was on. "What if they don't save us?" She whispered. I reached out to her. "They will. Don't you know Harry's?" She nodded, and that was the last thing I remembered, when suddenly I collapsed. Later, "Miss Granger?" I heard Madame Pomfrey say. "Yes?" I muttered. "Thank goodness. It worked," she exclaimed. I just then had realized that I was awake. "Emma? Where is she?" I jumped up saying. Madame Pomfrey moved to the side, and there was Emma, sitting on the bed in her Quidditch robes. I ran over and hugged her. I didn't think we'd wake up, but Harry came through. "Let's surprise the boys," Emma said. I nodded. We sprinted over to the Great Hall and rushed open the doors. "Hermione!" "Emma!" Ron and Harry yelled. "Emma, POV." We ran over and Hermione and I gave Harry a hug. I gave Ron a hug too, but Hermione didn't. "Evangeline!" I heard a voice yell. I turned and saw Fred running over. Suddenly, he came to a stop before he ran into me. We both blushed, and I gave him a hug too. Soon we all sat down. That was a good feast. Justin hurried over to us from the Hufflepuff table to wring Harry's hand and apologize endlessly for suspecting Harry. Hagrid turned up at 3:30, cuffing Harry and Ron so hard on the shoulders that they were knocked into their plates of trifle. I laughed at this. Ron and Harry's 400 points for Gryffindor securing the House Cup for the second year running made everyone happy. Professor McGonagall stood up to tell them all that the exams had been cancelled as a school treat. "Oh, no," said Hermione. Dumbledore announced that, unfortunately, Professor Lockhart would be unable to return next year, owing to the fact that he needed to go away and get his memory back. Quite a few of the teachers joined in the cheering that greeted this news. I did as well. "Shame," said Ron, helping himself to a jam donut. He was starting to grow on me. The rest of the final term passed in a haze of blazing sunshine. Hogwarts was back to normal with only a few small differences. Defense against the dark arts classes were cancelled, but we've had plenty of practice at that anyway, Ron told a disgruntled Hermione, and Lucius Malfoy had been sacked as a school governor. Draco was no longer strutting around the school as though he owned the place. On the contrary, he looked resentful and sulky. On the other hand, Ginny Weasley was perfectly happy again. I was glad that Hogwarts everyone was back to normal. Too soon, it was time for the journey home on the Hogwarts Express. Harry, Ron, Hermione, me, Fred, George, and Ginny got a compartment to themselves. We made the most of the last few hours in which we were allowed to do magic before the holidays. We played Exploding Snap, set off the very last of Fred and George's filibuster fireworks, and practiced disarming each other by magic. Fred and I had a lot of fun pranking the others. We were almost at King's Cross when Harry said something. "Ginny, what did you see Percy doing that he didn't want you to tell anyone?" "Oh, that," said Ginny, giggling. "Well, Percy's got a girlfriend." Fred dropped a stack of books on George's head. I cracked up.
"What?"
"It's that Ravenclaw prefect, Penelope Clearwater," said Ginny. "That's who he was writing to all last summer. He's been meeting her all over the school in secret. I walked in on them kissing in an empty classroom one day. He was so upset when she was, attacked." "You won't tease him, will you?" she added anxiously. "Wouldn't dream of it," said Fred, who was looking like his birthday had come early. I smirked at him and gave him a facial expression that said, "Don't even think about it." He replied with puppy dog eyes. "Definitely not," said George, sniggering. I smacked his arm, but I wanted to see the end result. The Hogwarts Express slowed and finally stopped. Harry pulled out his quill and a bit of parchment and turned to Ron, Hermione, and me. "This is called a telephone number," he told Ron, scribbling it twice, tearing the parchment in 3, and handing it to us. "I told your dad how to use a telephone last summer. He'll know. Call me at the Dursleys, okay? I can't stand another 2 months with only Dudley to talk to. Your aunt and uncle will be proud, though, won't they?" said Hermione as we got off the train and joined the crowd thronging toward the enchanted barrier. "When they hear what you did this year's..."
"Proud," said Harry.
"Are you crazy? All those times I could have died and I didn't manage it? They'll be furious." And together we walked back through the gateway to the Muggle world, laughing and not able to wait for the next year. Thank you for joining us for this suspenseful journey through Petrified. We hope you felt the tension, the magic, and the courage of Hogwarts as the mystery unfolded. Did you know that PotterGirl123 took inspiration from classic Gothic literature when writing Petrified? The eerie atmosphere and sense of dread are a tribute to timeless horror stories. And fun fact, the fanfiction community often praises Petrified for its detailed portrayal of lesser-known characters. Which moment from Petrified gave you chills? Was it the foreboding whispers, the shocking discoveries, or the courage of Hogwarts students standing together? Let us know your favorite part in the comments below. If you enjoyed this audiobook, don't forget to give it a like, share it with your fellow Potterheads, and subscribe to Grimoire Audiobooks for more captivating fanfiction and magical tales. And don't forget to ring the bell so you never miss an upload. As this story reminds us, even in the darkest of times, courage and friendship light the way. Until our next adventure, keep seeking the magic in every story and the bravery within yourself. See you soon and happy listening